Hello everybody and welcome to another Rinzy Ultimate Decades video. Today is going to be another recap because another decade has gone by, which is incredible to me. If you're new, thank you so much for checking this video out. The support I have gotten in the last just over a month has been so awesome and overwhelming, and I want to thank you guys because I wouldn't be doing these videos if it weren't for all the engagement I've gotten. It isn't even about the numbers, just being able to sort of fangirl over these stories with you guys has been my favorite part. So thank you a million times. Thank you. For those of you who were inquiring earlier on, I know I didn't have any social media tied to this account, but I did reactivate my Twitter, so you can follow me on there if you want any updates, because the community posts can be a little wonky at times and I don't like the dimensions, so I'll probably be posting like screenshots and stuff there. So go ahead and check that out. And this decade was an eventful one, so I'm just gonna go ahead and start the recap now. So we begin in the year 1310, just after Lavinia has passed away and Emma has married Leoric. Elric is getting used to the single dad life, trying to care for little Dominic and baby Arabelle without Lavinia there, and he's just trying to cope and be the best dad that he can. Georgie ages up into a toddler at this time, and he proves right off the bat to be a bit of a hellion. He's kicking Trader Jacques, biting Emmeline, etc. Emma is getting used to married life and visits James and Matilda often. She's still healing from what happened with Cassian, and Leoric has been kind enough to give her some space. After spending the first 6 months of their marriage in separate beds at Leoric's brother Wallace's home, Leoric and Emma get closer, and Emma becomes more comfortable with him as both a friend and a husband. She expresses relationship fears, and he's very understanding, and they're able to talk it out, and they finally develop enough of a romantic relationship to consummate their marriage. Despite this development, though, she still hasn't fully gotten over Cassian, but it's clear that she's healing. Matilda gives birth at this time to a healthy baby girl named Margaret. In the year 1311, Matilda is finding it a bit stressful trying to take care of 3 children. Emmeline and George seem to be constantly at odds and aren't entirely used to the idea of having another sibling around. Leoric has been improving upon his blacksmith apprenticeship working under his brother Wallace, and Emma and Leoric, who have been living with Wallace until now, have actually been bribed with a home. Prince Cassian's engagement to Princess Joan is announced by now, so they received a deed in the mail with King Arn's seal, using it as a hush method to keep Emma from trying anything weird now that Cassian's engagement is underway. Emma refuses it at first, but then finally agrees to it when she finds out she's pregnant with her and Leoric's first child, because they need some more space and they don't want to overstay their welcome at Wallace's home. She's pretty neutral about the pregnancy out of fear because she's been through so much, but Leoric is really excited because he did express earlier that he did hope to have children one day if she wanted to. Little does Emma know, Cassian has sort of been lingering here and there. He knows where they live, so he stays far enough away to where she hasn't noticed him watching, but we know that he hasn't fully gotten over Emma either. As winter starts, Arabelle unfortunately passes away by freezing to death. Elric is filled with guilt at having lost Arabelle so soon after losing Lavinia, and he's left to care for little Dominic alone. Emmeline ages up into a child. She's creative and serious and is still butting heads with Georgie. And at this time, Emma finally gives birth. Matilda's present after all that Emma's done for her, especially with her pregnancies. And Emma gives birth to twins during the first snow of the winter season. And she names them Whittaker and Gwyneth. While Gwyneth is healthy, Whittaker unfortunately passes away as a result of a lung defect. And Emma mourns what is the second loss of a child for her, while Leoric mourns with her. Of course, Leoric is there for Emma through this loss. And while Leoric is at the Windenburg marketplace, he finds a stray dog out in the cold. Knowing Emma loves dogs, he brings him home and they name him Bruno. Emma and Leoric clearly love each other as friends, and Leoric is sure of his feelings for her, but doesn't want to be the first to say that he loves her without knowing that she feels as strongly as he does. At the end of 1311, Prince Cassian of Windenburg marries his betrothed, Princess Joan of Willow Creek. Despite not wanting the marriage at first, Joan has decided to try to make the most of it and is excited to start a life with the handsome future king. And while they did initially get along, Cassian has actually grown cold and jaded after losing Emma and gets very drunk on his wedding night and calls Joan by Emma's name before quickly dismissing himself afterwards, leaving her all alone. It's the year 1312, and a year after Arabelle's death, Elric is caught between keeping Dominic as close as he possibly can and spending his nights and days at the local tavern. Matilda and James worry, so they sometimes watch over Dominic. Emmeline and Matilda have a strained relationship at this time. While she's trying her best, Matilda was raised in a very different society, and it reflects sometimes in the way she's raising Emmeline. Emmeline is more of a rebellious and free spirit, so she hates the expectations. She's a lot closer to James and her Aunt Emma. Maggie becomes a toddler at this time, and she's quick to assert her dominance before little George can bully her like he bullies Emmeline. During Christmas, the family spends time at the Rolfe home and have a fun holiday, which includes Matilda's brother Florian, and Matilda finds out she's pregnant during this holiday as well. Elric has found it increasingly difficult to stay at home because he's constantly reminded of Lavinia and Arabelle, so he's been staying at the Windenburg Marketplace Tavern with Dominic instead. There, he meets 3 ladies who sought sanctuary at the local abbey. Their names are Miriam, Mary Beth, and Orla, and they all bond with Elric over their own losses. Slowly, it looks like Elric's old, cheerful self is beginning to blossom again. It is now 1313. Joan and Cassian have a healthy baby boy named Prince Gavin, making him the 3rd in line for the Windenburg throne after King Arn and Prince Cassian. Despite his distant nature with Joan, Cassian is actually happy to have a son. Gwyneth ages up into a toddler. She has a scar on her right eye after getting too close to the fireplace when a small fire breaks out in the Weald household. Emma and Leoric absolutely love and care for her, while Bruno acts as her protective guard dog. Elric has still been staying at the Marketplace Tavern, so Emma and James go check on him on Dominic's birthday. They've become increasingly concerned over the years, but Dominic assures them they're okay and shows appreciation to Elric for doing his best as a single father. Around this time, Emma finds out she's with child again. Matilda gives birth to a healthy baby boy named Jonathan. While the Rolfe household has gotten larger and more chaotic, James and Matilda are still happy and fantastic parents to their children, and Matilda tries despite Emmeline still being very distant. Fairly soon after having their first child, Joan finds out she's with child a little too soon afterward, and she and Cassian aren't too excited about this pregnancy. However, growing increasingly lonely while being married to Cassian, Joan dotes on Gavin. Joan expresses her sadness to her mother, Queen Isabel of Willow Creek, but her mother tells her to make her marriage work because she has no other choice. When Emma is on her way to check on Elric one night, she gets attacked by the tax collector, Reginald McCrook, and fights back despite being heavily with child. She stays the night at the tavern for her own safety and meets up with Elric the next morning. He's worried that her marriage might be in trouble at first, but she explains what happened with Reginald, and he escorts her home. When Elric is telling Leoric about what happened, Emma goes into early labor around her 8th month or so due to the stress of the attack, and she manages to give birth to a baby boy named Thomas, and while he's a bit fragile, he's healthy. Leoric is especially angered that this event put both Emma and his child in danger. Elric tells James what happened, and James visits the Wealds to check on Emma, and while Emma begs them not to do anything rash, James, Elric, and Leoric have already started plotting how they're going to get back at Reginald McCrook for the attack. We are now in the year 1314, and at the beginning of the year, Joan gives birth to a princess named Eleanor, but the baby doesn't make it to infancy due to a lung defect. Cassian is saddened by the loss, but doesn't comfort Joan, who has not taken this loss well, as she feels overwhelming guilt over not wanting the baby initially. After a few months of plotting, Elric, Leoric, and James find a way to get Reginald McCrook to Windenburg's ancient ruins in order to corner him. An argument ensues, and McCrook tries to get them to calm down before Leoric is overcome with anger and attacks him. The 3 jump McCrook, and while he does put up a fight, they manage to knock him out pretty good. His memory is foggy due to the beating, but a witness does see James leaving the ruins after the fight. The men are paranoid for a few months, but things seem to be okay at first. Spring rolls in, and Emmeline makes friends with a Willow Creek native named Pierre, whose family has worked for Joan's family for years. Leoric visits James to let him know he thinks they're in the clear, and James expresses his appreciation for Leoric as a brother-in-law and what he did in Emma's defense. However, that peace doesn't last long when one of King Arne's knights arrests James for the attack on Reginald McCrook. Knowing Dominic only has Elric and Leoric promised Emma he wouldn't do anything, James takes the fall for the crime. He's thrown into the dungeon of the Windenburg Keep, which is where Joan and Cassian currently live, but Cassian is unaware of the arrest at this time. Matilda's left to take care of the kids on her own, and it's a very scary time for her and the kids. Both George and John celebrate their birthdays without James present. Despite having a rocky start as siblings, Emmeline and George grow closer, and Emmeline even begins to show some kindness towards her mother since all they have is each other. Matilda lets the others know about James's arrest, and Emma, now on her third pregnancy, is very upset with Leoric and Elric for lying to her, even if she understands why they did it. While at the Marketplace Tavern with Dominic, Elric runs into Miriam from the Abbey, and they spend the night getting to know one another a little better. Miriam even meets Dominic for the first time, and they all have a pleasant conversation. Toward the end of the year, Matilda finds out she's with child, and without James there, the thought of bringing another child into the world and doing this alone scares her. Her children help out in any way they can to take some of the stress off of her. Elric and Dominic visit, and when Matilda shares the news of her pregnancy, Elric feels he needs to step up the same way James has always stepped up for everyone around him, and offers to move in and help Matilda with the children. Dominic is worried about his father's constant tavern visits, but grows close to his cousins now that he lives with them. It's 1315, and we enter the Great Famine at this time, which is an added stressor to James being imprisoned. Back at the keep, Joan is once again with child, and Cassian has hired 2 knights to keep an eye on things, Sir Butterfield and Sir Crawford. And around this time, the Rolfs have learned through Emmeline's friend Pierre where James is being held. Emma visits the keep, and it's the first time she and Cassian have seen each other in years. She's upset, thinking that he had something to do with James's arrest, but he's quick to say that he had no idea and lets her visit her brother, who's grown weak from the limited food and time spent in a cell. Cassian promises he'll talk to his father to see what he can do and help James get out despite their rocky history. Afterward, Joan gives birth to a healthy princess and names her Arya. Later on, Cassian finally visits the Weald household to explain that there isn't much he can do since the arrest was made on the king's orders. With how unfair criminal trials are, the best he could arrange was a trial by combat. Emma's devastated, knowing that James has never handled a sword in his life, but wanting to do right by the Rolfs and feeling guilty over James being arrested, Leoric volunteers to fight for James. Emma isn't any happier by his offer since they have a growing family, but Leoric reassures her that it'll be fine since he knows his way around a sword as a blacksmith. When Leoric is at work the next day, Emma unfortunately finds Thomas has passed away in his crib as the first casualty of this famine. The grief sends Emma into labor, where she gives birth to another set of twins. Luckily, both make it, and she names them Catherine and Gregory. Soon after, Matilda gives birth to a baby boy on a dark and stormy night, and she names him James after his father. Later on, Leoric visits the farm and expresses that he's actually really worried about the possible outcome of this trial by combat. But since Elric has trained to be a knight in the past, he helps Leoric polish his swordsmanship to prepare him. At the end of the year, after Easter, Leoric is due to fight at this trial by combat. He's having a moment with his kids, not sure if it's the last time he'll see them, and finds Emma crying by Thomas's grave. After dealing with so much loss, Emma expresses her fears of losing Leoric and finally tells him that she loves him. And relieved that he can finally express his feelings, he tells her that he's loved her since the day they got married, because how could he not when she looks so beautiful? With that in mind, he finally makes his way to the keep with a stronger motivation to survive, for James's sake, but also so that he can see his family again. Leoric is due to fight the king's champion and brother-in-law Sir Gavin Godfrey, and miraculously wins the trial by combat and James's freedom. It's a bittersweet moment because he's never killed anyone and realizes just how much this is going to affect his psyche. James is overwhelmed and grateful for Leoric's selflessness and loyalty to Emma, and thanks him again for winning his freedom. When Leoric gets home, he finds Emma sleeping in bed and wakes her up, and she's filled with joy when she realizes it's not a dream and he's made it through the trial and freed her brother. The famine is still looming over their heads, but it's a moment of happiness because with Emma's confession of love, it feels like they've fallen in love for the first time all over again. James finally makes it home where he has an emotional reunion with Matilda and the kids. Emmeline is overwhelmed with emotion, and he promises he'll never worry them like that again. It's a happy end to the year as he holds each of his children again and finally gets to meet little James. In 1316, the famine is ongoing, but the Rolfs are trying to make the most of it. They spend All Fool's Day at the marketplace, where they hold an archery competition like the old days. There isn't any food, but they rejoice over a few drinks, and Matilda has a little too much fun for the first time, which worries Emmeline. Leoric and Emma's marriage is even better. Though Leoric has been dealing with the trauma of killing a man, Emma's there for him and comforts him to the best of her ability. The twins finally become toddlers and look more and more like Emma as they get older. Margaret also ages up and is just as silly and social as she was as a toddler. In 1317, John celebrates his birthday, as do James and Matilda. James has a near-death experience, but after some pleading with Grimm, Matilda is able to successfully and thankfully revive James. Elric and Dominic are spending time together at home when Mary Beth visits. Elric seems to really like her and seems to be a lot more like his old self, going as far as flirting with her, and Dominic seems to be content with his father's improvement. Back at the Windenburg Palace, Cassian visits and is about to head into King Arn's office when he overhears his father talking to his uncle Dargor. This is where he finds out that the attack on Emma was intentional and orchestrated by both men. It turns out that after Joan expressed how unhappy she is with her marriage to her mother, Queen Isabel then spoke to King Louis, and King Louis had a talk with Arn to remind him of their treaty. And also, despite the politics, he also just wasn't happy with Cassian's behavior as the father of the bride. In order to get Cassian to behave, Dargor offered to get rid of the root problem by getting rid of Emma and hired his old hitman Reginald McCrook to take her out. What he didn't expect was for the peasant girl to defend herself so fiercely and make it out, but now they were faced with the possibility of being outed for the misdeed, which could mean trouble when the kingdom is already dealing with the stress of a widespread famine. Cassian is overwhelmed with anger at the revelation, but he leaves the palace without a word. As we approach the end of the famine, the Wealds are enjoying the springtime and Gwyneth celebrates her birthday. Back at the keep, Cassian is drunk and enraged with Joan, who is with child once again. The verbal attack seems to come out of nowhere, and he keeps blaming her for something that he isn't quite making clear. After Cassian passes out, Sir Crawford stays at Joan's side to comfort her with some friendly conversation and shows appreciation, and for the first time, Joan feels welcome in a kingdom that she hasn't felt welcomed in since she got married. Back at the farm, Emma and Elric spend some time with Matilda and James. The famine is beginning to take its toll, and they're trying to be optimistic. Emma has not revealed that she and Lorik have mostly gone without any food because they want to make sure their children are being fed, especially after losing Thomas so suddenly. The children go out to play, but Dominic is too tired, and Emma comforts him before they all head back to their respective homes. The famine doesn't affect the main Rolf household, but the casualties are still impactful. In another tragic twist of fate, Elric loses his remaining child Dominic, leaving him alone. Leoric is the first of the Wealds to go, which breaks Emma's already fragile heart. Matilda, James, and Elric try to be there for her, but the effects of the famine have already taken its toll on her body. At her deathbed, she's only regretful that her children will be left without their parents, but Elric, still mourning his own loss, promises he'll do right by them and raise them as his own. Matilda and James promise to be there for the children, and Emmeline can't bear the loss of her favorite aunt and isn't present to say goodbye to Emma. Hearing about Emma's state, Cassian races to the Weald household, getting there just in time to watch the light leave her eyes as Emma also dies of starvation. The famine takes several victims around Windenburg, including Leoric's brother Wallace, Father Bartholomew, Mary Beth, and Cassian's youngest brother Jaron. While mourning at the palace with his family over his deceased brother, Cassian bumps into Dargor. Already in a state of heightened emotion and knowing that Dargor is responsible for Emma's attack, Cassian's rage builds up and awakens something horrible in him. He sets Dargor ablaze with magic, killing him instantly. Magic was outlawed in Windenburg by King Arn years ago, but surprisingly, Cassian doesn't seem to be affected emotionally by what he's done. At the beginning of 1318, Joan gives birth to her fourth child, a baby boy named Edward. It's a difficult labor and she barely makes it, but she suffers yet another loss when Edward dies from a heart defect. The Rolfe family is still in mourning, but slowly recovering from the famine. Their crops are in bloom and things seem to be looking up, but Emmeline develops a stomach infection and passes away unexpectedly, completely devastating the entire family. George tries to plead for her, but it fails, and he's overwhelmed with guilt and grief over his sister's death. Back at the keep, Gavin celebrates his birthday, which brings Joan some joy. She's already begun to distance herself from Cassian, but manages to seduce him after deciding she wants to try for another baby. Because despite having a terrible marriage, she really loves being a mother and loves her children. In 1319, Miriam visits Elric to check on him and help him take care of his nieces and nephew. Elric realizes how difficult it is to do this by himself, and after some talking, he asks Miriam if she would be interested in a marriage of convenience, which would be beneficial to both him and Miriam, who is also a single parent. Miriam agrees, and they spend the next few months introducing Miriam to the rest of the family. Jonathan celebrates his birthday and ages up with a case of sticky fingers. The day of Elric's wedding, Matilda helps him get ready. Emma used to be the one who would help Elric with haircuts and shaves, so it's a sweet bonding moment for them since Matilda has always been a great sister-in-law to him. At the church, she also helps watch over the kids while they get ready, and Elric and Miriam finally get married. There's no romantic love between them just yet, but they intend on making the most of the union, so they have their wedding night after spending some time getting to know one another a little more that evening. Gwyneth has also become friends with Talia, who is Miriam's daughter, and she's grateful to have a new sibling her own age. Meanwhile, back at the Rolfe household, George is talking to Margaret and John and tells them that he overheard Cassian speak to some lady at the Marketplace Tavern about the possibility of resurrecting a dead loved one. Even though witchcraft is outlawed in Windenburg, there is a land not too far away called Glimmerbrook, where someone might be able to help bring Emmeline back from the dead. Margaret isn't on board with the plan, but promises to distract their mother while George and John make the day-long journey. When they finally do make it, they meet the lady that George saw at the bar, Esther, and her mother, Josephine. George explains their situation to Josephine, hoping she might be able to point him in the right direction, and she tells him to be careful about who they discuss their plans with since magic is a touchy subject. She then says that she might be able to help if they bring her a piece of Emmeline's remains or ashes and make an offering to the wishing well in Windenburg's ancient ruins, which is heavily guarded by Arn's men for unknown reasons. The thought of desecrating Emmeline's grave is not something John and George want to do, but they rationalize that seeing Emmeline again would make their parents happy and finally lift the overwhelming guilt from little George's shoulders. Back at the keep, Joan and Sir Crawford have been going on walks during her current pregnancy and getting to know one another a little more. Things seem to be getting a bit flirty, but they catch themselves every time. Later on, Joan finally gives birth to a healthy baby and names her Isabella after her mother, but her happiness is short-lived. Joan receives word from Sir Butterfield that her father, King Louis of Willow Creek, has died, so she'll have to travel back to attend his funeral and later her brother Laurent's coronation. And this is where we ended the decade. I anticipate this video is going to be a lot longer than my last recap because so much happened, but it's been a wild ride. I had a lot of fun sort of playing the story by ear and taking your guys' comments into consideration and just going back and forth over all the emotional turmoil, and I really look forward to filming these videos. So thank you guys so much again. I look forward to the next decade and what that will bring, and I hope you all have a great day. Bye.